The Meeples and Miniatures podcast is sponsored by Two Fat Lardies, Geek Nation Tours, and by the generous donations of you, the listener. We really appreciate your support. Thank you to everyone. The Meeples and Miniatures podcast, episode 225, Rommel, with hosts Neil Shuck, Mike Hobbs and Dave Luff, and guest Sam Mustafa. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. My name is Neil Shuck, and on this show I am joined once again by the Welsh wizard himself. It is Mr. Michael Hobbs. Hello, sir.
Hello all. How's everybody? I'm back.
What, you're back after last week?
Yeah.
Yes, that's good. And talking of people who are back, it is the great guru himself. Hello, the Lovemeister.
Yeah. I don't think I'm back fully.
You don't think you're back fully?
No, not really. I'm not feeling very well.
Oh
Dear. I wonder why that could be.
Yeah, after the trip to Cardiff.
Oh.
And more of that.
Yes. Yes. So, here we are.
Might get chucked out my own cult.
More of which very shortly. Yes. So, hello and welcome one and all. No Mr. Whittaker this week as he's at band rehearsal, also I understand. So we are left this week with a different trio to present. What have we got in store for you this week? Well, on our main bit of show, we are going to be talking to the one, the only Sam Mustafa, all about his new World War II rules Rommel. We had a good chat with Sam last week, so that's coming up. The floodgates have opened because Hobbsy has finally been able to talk about it. After months of staying silent. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, almost a year.
Indeed. And we saw at least one version of it, didn't we, Luffy?
Did we?
A Rommel, yeah.
Didn't we? I can't remember.
Yeah, that was the night. Yeah, we were playing with all those paper chits on the squares.
Crikey!
You were playing the Russians.
Is that what it was called? Is it called Rommel, was it? I don't think it was called Rommel then, was it, when we were playing it?
Yeah, it was still called Rommel.
Was it? I thought it was just work in progress.
It's always good to have people on the ball, isn't it? Yeah. Excellent.
Crikey, it's been that long.
Yeah. Anyway, so we are catching up with that game that myself and Dave managed to play a little bit. Failed dismally as playtesters, I think.
We couldn't keep up with the rule changes, could they?
Not at all. Not at all.
I was drowning.
Yeah.
That's version 2.67. We're on 2.679 now. And it was only Tuesday.
Yeah, Sam does make mention of the fact that, perhaps I'm not cut out to be on a playtester. Or we're not cut out to be on a playtesters. Never mind. Hey-ho. Yeah, so that's what we've got coming up for you in the main part of the show. But before then, we need to catch up with what we've been up to. And we've had a really interesting week, as if you've been following us on Twitter, you'd have found out. But we've had an interesting week, lots to talk about. So we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be catching up with everything we've been up to.
I don't like it, Sergeant.
Me neither, sir.
Good Lord, it's really looking pretty bad.
Yes, sir. It happens every time, sir. It's too predictable, sir.
How far do you think we've advanced, Sergeant?
6 inches, sir. It's always 6 inches. We advance 6 inches, then Jerry gets a go. The lads are calling it High Go, You Go, sir.
High go, you go. Grief.
And they don't like it, sir.
Oh. Not like it. Seems pretty straightforward to me. Rather like cricket. We have an innings, then the other chap does.
Well, that's all very well, sir, in cricket, sir, but begging your pardon, it ain't like that, sir, in war. I don't think Mr. Hitler plays like that.
What, Hitler? No, gosh, he'd like to go all the time.
Oh, no, sir, lummy. Oh, well, sir, anyway, sir, it's like this, sir. If it carries on like this, high go, you go, me and the lads won't be coming to your Thursday evening games club, and that's the way it is, sir.
Looking for more of a challenge with your World War II games? Are you tired of the predictability of I go, you go systems? Iron Bean Shopman provides real command challenges on an unpredictable battlefield. Two fat lardies, playing the period and not the rules since 2002. Pip pip.
What have we been playing? What have we been buying? We might even have painted something. The Meeples and Miniatures crew reveal all. So what have we been up to in the past week? Shall we all go first?
I had house guests. Over to you two.
Well, hang on, one question. Dave, have you painted anything this week?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
Too
Okay.
busy. Well, I have one-to-one, but
Yeah. Okay. Well, I've not painted anything either because I've been too busy doing other things.
Yeah.
Right. Have we bought anything this week? Tell you shortly. Right. Have you played anything this week?
That might take a while.
That may take a while. Yes, we have played, and we have played a lot. Right. First off, Mr. Love, last Thursday night. Can I take your mind back to what we were doing last Thursday night?
God, that's going to be a tough one. I've been in bed a few times now.
Okay, we were playing.
What were we playing? Oh, I know what we were playing. We were playing Amyitis.
We were playing Amyitis. Right, okay, it was one of those times when we turned up at Dave's, and we had a couple of games, and then we looked at Dave's shelf, and there are several games on Dave's shelf which are still in their shrink wrap, or maybe been played once, but not by our gaming group. And so we went, okay, what we got to play?
This is from that haul that the Brummie gets the hump with every time I mention it. You know, the one I didn't pay for.
No, the one that you paid for and then got a refund on.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Let's get the right way around.
So it took me that long to get through all these games.
Yeah. In the end, we chose this game. Is it Rio Grande? Is it Rio Grande?
I can't remember who's.
Or is it Queen?
Actually,
I think it's Rio Grande. Anyway, it's called Amyitis, and it's a relatively old game. Was it 2007, something like that? And,
yeah, it's getting on a bit now.
Yeah. And anyway, so we started setting it up. And
you are building the Gardens of Babylon, aren't we?
Yes, the theme of the game, building the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. That sounds gripping, doesn't it, Mr. Hobbs?
It does.
Yeah, so gardens, you say? Mm.
Gardens.
It's like a biblical game for Percy throwers.
Lovely. Niche market.
Obviously, slightly different from trading in Renaissance Europe, but yes, building a hanging.
What's wrong with trading in Renaissance Europe?
Because the amount of games where you trade in Renaissance Europe. As a theme, it's been a bit overdone, I think.
We could say that about World War II.
I suppose, yes. Right, anyway, so it sounds fairly gripping. Building the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, and when we went through the setup, and it took us a while to get through the setup because let's just say the rules weren't particularly clear on setup.
We don't think English was the first language they were wrote in.
No.
We think they were probably translated about 4 times before they got to English. And some of it was lost in translation.
Just a bit. So having then died onto Board Game Geek and looked at a couple of player aids and sorted out what the heck we were meant to be doing.
Saved our gaming evening, didn't it?
It did.
Board Game Geek.
It did. Let's just say it wasn't the first game that we ended up kind of going, oh, this is good, and playing till late.
Yes, it was well past Dave's bedtime, wasn't it?
Oh, it was
Hickman's.
definitely well past. Definitely well past Dave's bedtime. But it was a really good game, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was smashing. Very good, very, very good game. And it wasn't until afterwards we looked on the Geek how highly rated it was, did we?
No. It's what was it, 7.4 or something like that?
I remember you were saying it was 7 point something along the time. Anyway,
Amyitis. You may still get hold of a copy second hand somewhere, but it's definitely worth having a look. It's a very it's effectively worker placement.
Was it? It's worker placement, hand management, resource management, isn't it? It's all sorts.
It's all sorts of bits.
Very good.
Yeah,
very, very Eurogamey as well. I mean, no one manages to race ahead, do they? We found.
Well, it appeared to at the start, we kind of went, "Ooh, this looks a bit." It's one of these many paths to victory sort of games, and I mean, at the start, I seemed to rush out into a lead, which obviously can't be right in any sort of game.
That's right. There was worries that it might be power grid, wasn't there?
But in the end, there was 4 points in it between the three of us.
I think it was a 7 point spread, wasn't it? You said.
No, in this game, it was less than that, wasn't it? It was less than that. I think it was about. It was only about 4 or 5 points in it. Yeah, between the three of us. And it could have gone either way on a couple of occasions. So really good game, Amyitis.
Right, so that was Thursday. What did you do on Friday?
What did you do on Friday, Dave?
It was my birthday.
Happy birthday, Dave.
Happy birthday, Dave.
Tried to forget about it. Neil remembered straight away. I have to bleep that.
Yeah.
So?
We went somewhere, didn't we?
We did.
I had to get up early in the morning on my birthday and drive somewhere.
Yeah.
You made me do it.
We drove to Wales.
We drove to Wales. We didn't, not anywhere in Wales, though. We drove to the gaming central of Great Britain, didn't we?
What, Abergavenny? No, we drove past Abergavenny.
Firestorm Games. Firestorm Games.
Firestorm Games. Yes, only the gaming capital of Wales as opposed to the gaming capital of the UK, which of course is Abergavenny.
No, oh yes. No. Firestorm Games is now officially, according to the Guru, the gaming capital of the UK now.
Oh.
Because it is just so awesome.
What's this Guru approved?
Told you.
Guru approved, yeah.
Guru
They can put it above the door in a diagonal sort of stamp now across the door above the banner. Guru approved. Well, I don't know if it's that approved.
So you two went to Firestorm early, and
yeah. Well, we met the wobbly shelves.
You did.
Although we are assured by Rob that because you see the thing was we met Rob the owner from Firestorm and had a chat, and obviously. On this show, we have joked on several occasions about the wobbly shelves at Firestorm. Little did I know that Firestorm did actually used to have wobbly shelves. Because Rob told us all about them. And I went, no, they're fixed now, they're fixed. No, they're not.
No, they're definitely not.
So let's put this into context. So Dave has spent, in the last year on gaming, what, a couple of quid?
Probably stretched to a tenner, possibly. A few Vallejo pints.
Yeah. And within half an hour being in Firestorm, how much you spent?
Well, on the first visit, on the Friday, the first purchase on the Friday was £138.
Welcome to my world, mate.
Yeah, those shelves are terrible.
They are.
Yeah, yes, and some of that was on order, which apparently is coming today. Yeah. Or was it tomorrow? It's coming tomorrow. It's not even coming today.
Ooh. So what did you buy?
Well, the much needed and much moaned at, and even though it's probably going to be about a decade by the standard of the gaming group that I'm playing with at the moment, that you're actually going to get to do any of it, the expansions for Dungeon Saga. I think it took 8 attempts to do the first level.
Oh, sure, we'll get better.
I'm sure. Yeah. Sure you will. Yeah.
So, was there any other purchases made on Friday at Firestorm?
Possibly. It was all Dave's fault.
Purchase order was you next, wasn't it?
It was me, yeah, because I was looking for a copy of...
Hey, Dave, look at this! I was on the other side looking at something else, considering whether I was going to open my wallet for a third time, or second time. And I heard this, hey, Dave, look at this! What, Neil?
Well, I was looking for a copy of Village for you.
Oh, yeah, you were trying to help me spend my money again, weren't you? I remember this. And it backfired, didn't it?
Yeah, because right, okay. If people remember, there was a game, a board game by Ron Kinesia called Samurai, which came out in 1998, 1999, 1998. Yeah, about that. And yeah, production values are okay, but I mean, it was a really good game. And then it's did the usual thing of being around for a while, then going out of print. Anyway. I'd forgotten that Fantasy Flight Games had reprinted it. Completely forgotten about it, and was going down the shelves at Firestorm and went, ooh, Samurai! I mean, yeah, and honestly, this has nothing to do with the fact that it's a Samurai theme game.
No.
Seriously.
No,
of course, no.
But
I mean, if it was a European trading game, I mean, you'd have still bought it.
Yeah, especially if it was in the Renaissance.
Oh, yes, without a doubt.
Yes.
Anyway, I saw it and thought, ooh. And then saw the price and thought, ooh. Yes, I bought it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was Samurai by Ron Kinesia, which he bought. And then, so he bought that. And then we looked at the time and went, got a couple of hours to kill before we have to go to Hobbs's. So...
You're missing another purchase, actually.
Are we? Oh,
yeah.
Oh.
Because then I spent about, I don't know, how much was it?
10 quid.
On.
It was 10 quid.
It was 10 or 20 quid.
It was 10 quid.
It might be just 10. Might be 10 quid to you.
It's an armful to some poor boy. Yeah.
That's right. It's a big deal for me. It was.
What was it?
What was it?
Yeah.
It was some sleeves, I think, wasn't it? It was some sleeves. Final Fantasy. God. Flight. No. Help me out.
Fantasy Flight.
That's the ones.
Fantasy Flight. Card sleeves.
Card sleeves. Thanks, Neil.
Such a drama over such a small product. Okay, yeah.
I'll tell you what. You take the mickey. I'm still getting over it at the weekend, you know. A serious shock, this is. You may belittle it.
Right, so we did that. So we had a couple of hours to kill. So we thought
we got told to play a game, didn't we?
Yeah, we thought we'd play a game. So we played Samurai.
Well, we got told. We got told to play a game. I think it was Paul, wasn't it?
Oh yeah.
Paul said, "We'll play a game then."
Play a game then. Yeah. So we had a beer because you can at Firestorm, and then we played the game.
It was very civilized.
So we had a game of Samurai, which was that the first time you ever played that, Dave?
Yeah.
Decent game?
Oh, it's a very good game.
So it was a good purchase then. So,
yeah.
Cool.
Right, very good.
So then we did that. So we did that, and then we wandered up the A470.
As you do.
As you do. And
to the valleys.
Heads off.
Went past Splot, or the turning for Splot, which is made famous, isn't it, by Radio 5 Live, I think. Or was it Radio 2?
It's Radio 2. Radio 2.
Yeah. Yes. Made famous by that.
And we arrived at Shea Hobbs.
Yes, and it hasn't been the same since.
Yeah, we even allowed in the Hobbit hole, weren't we?
We were.
Yeah, we need to study.
Go and see the glories inside the hole.
I didn't know one person could physically own that number of really useful boxes.
Well, I don't know. You're pretty close to it, I think.
I do have one or two.
Just your one or two. Then you go, oh, there's another couple. And then, oh, I'm going to say, look under that table. Oh, no! We retreated to the wonders that were in the Wizard's Tower. And then we spent a very pleasant evening. Mr. Hobbs cooked us food. And we ate. And we chatted and we drank.
Plied us with alcohol.
As you do.
As you do.
Indeed.
And probably the easiest way to get you to sleep is by getting you drunk.
Yes, okay, so that was Friday. And then, of course, Saturday came. So Mr. Hobbs plied us with food again. Oh,
After we managed to get Neil out the pit, anyway.
Yes.
Neil
slept very well.
Look, I'm not a morning person, okay? I just want to put that out there. I am not a morning person.
It's me and Dave up about 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
Is Neil getting up? I don't know.
Yeah.
The smell of bacon will get him. The smell of bacon will get him up, said Hobbsy.
Yeah.
No.
No.
Oi! Come on, we want to eat breakfast!
I could hear the moaning from downstairs. This is valuable gaming time when we're losing.
So we had breakfast.
So
we drove to
we had
Firestorm.
No. Let's go. No, we had an immense breakfast.
It was a gamer's breakfast.
It was.
Mike said that breakfast was needed to build our strength up for the day and what was coming.
Indeed.
Yeah, and little did we know what was going to happen.
Little did we know what was going to happen. Indeed not. We arrived at Firestorm Games on Saturday morning. And just want to say thank you to everybody who, for some strange reason, decided that, oh, Neil and Dave are coming down to Cardiff. Let's go down and say hi. It was lovely to see everybody.
Fools.
Yeah, it's lovely. So I mean, it's like, hello, Jeff. Hi, Jeff. Thanks to Steve. Hi, Steve. Thank you to Matt and Ralph. I mean, Matt wasn't even planning on coming originally. It was only because I texted him as we flew past Monmouth.
Yeah, missed a cup of tea as well.
We did. Oh, desperate. We'll know next time. We'll know next time.
And Ty as well came down.
And Ty came down.
Ty did.
Yeah, Ty came down, and so there was a whole gang of us.
It was smashing. Very good.
Yeah. So the hardship, we had a day playing games.
It's a tough life, but someone's got to do it.
Yeah.
Yes, and 2 of those were review games.
2 of them were review games. Yeah, and one of them I almost got the rules right on. Yeah. So we played another game of Samurai while we were waiting for people to turn up. So Mr. Hobbs got introduced to Samurai, as did Mr. Slade.
That was good, playing it with 4 people.
Yeah. It's a better game with 4 rather than 2.
I think it's good. Well, I thought it was pretty good with 2, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it's different. Yeah, but it's one of those games that does actually cater well for, because it plays 2, 3, or 4, and I think it caters for its complete range of players really well. So we did that, and then we had a game of 9 Worlds, which is a new area control board game by Richard Denning, who's actually one of the guys who organises the UK Games Expo. The theme, it's area control based on the Norse gods. Basically, each player is playing a Norse god and or Norse hero, and you are attempting to control the 9 realms of that particular mythos.
Yeah, I had no idea what I was doing.
Mind you, having said that, I was reading the rules, and I think to start with, I don't think any of us had any particular idea what we were doing. I think by the end of the game we were doing all right, but having said that, Dave ran away with it massively, and we were, we had a decent enough time playing, and I think we got most of the rules right. Unfortunately, I fundamentally got one rule wrong. However, it really was a doozy to get wrong, which meant that in the end, Luffy won by about 40 points.
Well,
yeah,
just use the tactic,
Well, basically, I created because I read a rule wrong. I created a loophole in the rule which they then drove a truck through and won the game. Having said that, I'm actually really keen to play it again because there's some really interesting
With the revised rules.
Yes, with the proper version. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting little bits in there. There's some nice rules, and I'd like to play it again. But
I would like to add to the gentle listener here that I was just playing the rules I was supposed to, as I was told by the man sitting next to me. No names, shook.
I fully agree that everybody was playing the rules. Everybody was playing the rules as I told them to play. I mean, the fact that given any opportunity in the area control and conflict, everybody just ganged up on me.
No, that's a little harsh, Neil. Not everyone ganged up on you.
No, I didn't. I left you alone. I was just playing my own furrow, and everyone left me to it.
Yeah, it was just me, Matt, and Ty who ganged up on you.
Exactly. There you go.
So they basically all ganged up on me. So I literally got wiped out by the end of the game, and Dave was waltzing off into the distance winning. And it seemed that everybody else didn't care that Dave was off winning because they were having too good a time
kicking the brummy.
Yep. But however, I'm looking forward to playing it again because actually, I mean, we were going home in the car and we were saying that we think that game's broken, and I'm thinking.
Well, we said, didn't we? Either that
or I've got something fundamentally wrong. And fun enough, it's one of these things I was reading down. I then got the rule book out and I was reading down. It went la 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 la. Turned the page over. I went. However, So the moral of that story is when reading rules, always turn the page over just to make sure that there is no continuation on the other side where it tells you. However, in this circumstance and this circumstance, you do this instead. Never mind.
It was good fun. A good game.
It was a good game.
Yeah.
And then we had a bit of a surprise. Yes. Oh, yeah. Oh, that was into the afternoon, and we had food and everything. Nice food at Firestorm.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, simple fare, but very nice.
And then we had a bit of a surprise, and I'll let you two talk about this
one. Well, I had a surprise because I spent another 38 quid in between these two games.
Oh yeah, you did. You went and bought some more stuff, didn't you?
Yeah. It's just the way it works, isn't it? At Firestorm, just things keep falling off the shelf.
Never leave your seat, mate. That's the rule is.
Yeah.
So. After David finished his third or fourth batch of purchases, when Dave falls off the wagon, he falls off the wagon. We sat down and we had a chat with Andy Warple, who's one of the managers of Firestorm. Andy runs the battlefields, which is the sort of gaming area in Firestorm. We recorded some audio with him, which we'll play out at some stage. And they very kindly gave us a demo copy of a new game. Not for us to keep, but for us to unpack and play. And they said, give it a go and do a little review of it. And that game was The Godfather, Corleone's Way?
Empire.
Corleone's Empire. So, this is about 4:30. So, and the rest of the guys had to go. So, it was just the three of us, and Andy came and joined us, and we thought, we'll just do one turn just to get an idea of the mechanics.
Because the shop shuts soon and it takes a while to set up and
And of course,
learn it.
Yeah, and of course you two guys had a long drive home. So 3 hours later, we finished the game because none of us wanted to give up. And what can we say about it? Other than two of us bought it.
They had to keep the shop open so you could both buy a copy after we played it.
Oh dear.
So me and Dave bought it.
Shh, the minions haven't realised. I didn't tell them about that one.
So, are we going to do the review now, or should we do that separately?
Oh no, we'll do an in-depth review separately because it deserves an in-depth review separately because it's a blooming good game.
It is a very, very good game. So it's a game by Eric M. Lang,
the guy who did Blood Rage.
Dudes on a map. Well,
And figures are by Cool Mini or not. And it's very good. Very, very, very good game.
Too good.
Yeah. Although, I will say, and I'll put this out there now, I'm not sure how much of a theme of The Godfather it's got. It's a very good game, and it's a very good sort of mob, mafia-style game. But looking back on it, it didn't grab me as being Godfather-esque. Just putting that out there.
Well, it was like, it was a great gangster game, whether or not it played through The Godfather, or whether it was the case of, well, it was all right playing with all, it basically had this thing of, well, okay, you got all the characters, well, you got a load of characters from it, but actually, yeah, it was more a, gang mob style game, as opposed to specifically The Godfather.
Mm.
I'll have to go back and watch the film. Been a while.
I didn't feel like I was in the Godfather film in the same way that Star Wars Rebellion, you think you're in Star Wars. Because it's very thematic to the films. This was, I don't know, a big Godfather light, but it was a damn good game. Which is why I bought it.
It is a seriously good game. I mean, again, it's worker placement, a bit of area control.
Bit of stabbing your neighbours in the back.
It's just business.
Just business. Blowing up people.
If I had $1 for every time somebody said it's nothing personal, it's just business, as yet another one of my models went swimming with the fishes, I'd have won that game.
You would have. By a long way.
Just business.
Just business. I think we all enjoyed it. I mean, because, like I say, Andy kept the shop open first until we finished because he wasn't going anywhere.
He was as engaged in it as any of us. And in the end, guess who won?
Yes, 3-0 to Mr. Laugh.
The mild-mannered, unassuming man in the corner. Yes, Mr. Innocent-looking misdirection himself.
Oh, misdirection, honestly.
Yeah, and yet again,
2 games of Samurai.
Yes, and yet again, it has to be said. If Andy and Mike had not fixated yet again on kicking the Brummie and actually looked at who was winning the game.
It was just business, mate.
Yeah.
The problem is, you kept on being in the places that they wanted now.
Yeah.
So you ended up in the Hudson all the time. I was just quiet, disrespecting, coming to the house and giving them no respect.
Yeah.
Unless
my daughter's wedding.
Your daughter's wedding, that's right.
I think Mr. Hobbs's car bomb in turn 3 was a bit OTT.
Oh, you spent a long time looking for the rules.
Oh, I did.
Yeah, wiped out most of the lower wheat.
That's what I could do. That's what I could tell. I did something right. You can't do that. Hang on, I'm going for the rules. Go for the rules. Go for the rules. I need to know what this keyword means. Go for the rules. Go for the. Oh, damn it!
It was a bugger. They're all dead. Dave, they're all dead.
Yeah.
So that was a cracking game. Really well, as I say, you can tell with the fact that even Mr. Luff, having played it, immediately went. Oh, no, correction. You went. This is a really good game. I want to buy it after turn 1.
Yeah. And Andy went, we've got 2 copies. We'll keep the store open.
And that was happening.
We had a cracking weekend. First of all, thank you to Hobbsy for inviting us and letting us stay overnight.
Mm-hmm. Yep, cheers. And the good lady.
And the good lady, indeed. And
she sends her regards.
Very good. Hi, Mandy. And thank you to Jeff. Hi, Jeff. Thank you to Steve. Hi, Steve. Thank you to Matt and Ralph and to Ty for all coming down and saying hi. Feel really guilty with the fact that these people came down and we didn't get to play with all of them.
Should have bought Cash and Guns now.
Yeah, what was I thinking? Of course, yes, Cash and Guns. Cash and Guns will play loads.
Yeah, and it's a gangster theme game as well. So it'd be very fit in keeping for the afternoon. It would have been.
That would have been good. Yes. In fact, actually, I think Cash and Guns with the expansion does play 9. So yes, hopefully we'll come down again and we'll get a couple of games in with people. But no, really impressed with Firestorm Games. It's excellent venue.
Yes, very good, full of gaming goodness.
Mm.
Yes, Mr.
And many people.
And many, yeah, indeed. It was a really good couple of days. So we enjoyed that.
Dear.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just left Wales many pounds lighter.
Well, many pounds. Yes, many pounds lighter somewhere, and many pounds heavier somewhere else.
Oh dear. I'll get thrown out my own cult here. Well, I've actually bought something else since I've actually left as well. That's the problem. Because I went and bought the Critters box, didn't I? Because I realised that I needed to buy that as well. So I've bought more. So I bought, well, I think it was about 260 quid's worth from Firestorm anyway. Never mind.
So that was the end of Mr. Lust's purchases. Well, I bought some paint at Firestorm, about half a dozen pots of paint, several different flesh colours, because I'm still kind of playing around with. I'm not happy with the flesh colours I've got, so I'm playing around with a whole load of different ones to see which I like the best. Plus the fact Mr. Hobbs convinced me to buy this. Oh, I dropped it. What was it? Agrax Earthshade, which is the new Devlin. Is that the new Devlin Mud?
Yeah.
And then he was showing off this Lamian. Is that how you pronounce it?
Easy for you to say.
Yeah.
Lamian medium, which is, well, yeah, it's basically a bit like thinner, isn't it? Ish.
Yeah.
Sort of, yeah.
Clear medium, isn't it?
Clear medium.
Clear medium.
Yeah, as opposed to the matte medium, which from Vallejo, which is a bit which is opaque. That's clear, and Mike was showing that off to us while we were in the Wizard's Tower on Friday. So I bought some of that to give that a go. At some point. Sure, lovely.
Didn't say anything.
I could hear the comment coming. Anyway, so that was that, and then I picked up the Daimyo's Retinue mounted box set for Test of Honor, because I want to. Excuse me, in the Warring States game. The Warring States game day that's coming up at the end of September. I'm looking at putting together a couple of war bands, one of which is a mounted war band. Because I'm a big fan of Takeda Cavalry. George.
Are you? Why is that? Because yeah.
So I picked that up from North Star this week. So that was me, and then Mr. Hobbs.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Or should I say, Mr. J.R.R. Hobbs?
Yeah. Well, you see, what happened was. It's been a funny old week. Last week I bought that stuff off Aid. That Lord of the Rings stuff.
Yeah.
Stuff. It's a bit more than stuff.
Those 2 boxes.
Couple of pallets.
Yeah. Those 300 figures I bought off Aid Deacon. Well, I kind of decided I needed some more wargs, because I only had 6 in there. So
as you do. I
went on eBay. Yeah, I went on eBay and somebody was selling them. One box. I bought a box of wargs for 12. That's a nice amount of wargs. Next thing you know, I get this email pop in my mailbox from this guy who I bought the stuff off, the wargs, going, "Are you Mike Hobbs who lives in Irwin? Because if you are, I know you." And it was my old mate, Tony Healy, who I've known for years and lost touch with about 8 years ago.
Oh, okay. Funny that.
So we sort of met up over an eBay sale. So we're sort of in touch, and he's going to try and get down to Cardiff sometime soon, and we're going to meet up and have a game or something. So he sent me the wargs over, and he also went, "I got a few bits and bobs, I'll chuck it in." So this box arrives with my box of wargs in it, and about 10 spoons of Gondor troops and some Rohans and some Mordor orcs. So that was another 120 figures.
Oh, this is I just took a few bits in.
What are you planning on doing? Helm's Deep?
He's getting close to doing Pelennor Fields 1-to-1.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Tony, if you're listening, for that. It's very kind of you. But that obviously meant I got to Gondor Army, because. And then I had a message on Twitter from a guy called Jeff.
Not that Jeff.
I've been chatting to. It's a completely different Jeff. Jeff had been following him for a while. He's a really good painter. And so I've been following him, and he sort of went, I've got some Lord of the Rings stuff here if you're interested. And I live in the Onve Valley, about 10 miles away. So he sent me a picture, and there was a lot of it. And on Sunday, after you two went home, I popped over to see Jeff.
Right.
And I bought a few bits and bobs.
A few bits and bobs.
This huge... Yeah, so Jeff had this huge box of Lord of the Rings stuff. None of it's painted. He's got some that he's painted already, but this is all unpainted, mostly metal. So I picked up some more wargs, about 25 of them.
How many?
This is to go on top of the 6 you originally had, plus the 20 odd that you just bought on eBay. No, 12.
No, they are 6. I had 12 before, and then this. I mean, this only puts up to about 36 or so.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe a few more. Yeah. And some Rohan figures, and there were some Gondor figures in there, and cavalry, and a couple of trolls, and a fell beast, and a big artillery piece, and some characters. I mean, not a huge amount.
I saw the size of the bag. It was bulging.
A couple hundred figures there. So I found that was great. So I went home, and I sorted it all out, and I started counting it. I sort of thought to myself, Jeff had a pile of elves in there, and I really like elves. So I went back today and I saw them again, and I picked up another batch.
You got a problem?
Not anymore.
No, he's got a different problem there.
Yeah.
How did you smuggle these in past the good lady?
She was in London today.
Right. It all begins to make sense now.
Yeah. So the car's been emptied. So and it's really nice because Jeff's a lovely bloke. He wants to play Chain of Command. So we're going to arrange a Chain of Command game with him, hopefully next week. And it's always nice to meet a fellow gamer who only lives about 10 miles away.
Oh, yeah, that's a huge bonus, that is. That's brilliant.
Huge bonus, yeah. Especially when he's got what he describes as his shed, but is actually a very large brick-built, almost extension to the back of his house, with a table in it and sofas and things.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And it's only about 10 miles away. I mean, okay, it's over the mountain, but it's a lovely drive. Although he has still got a few extra. He has got he's got another fell beast there and a balrogs and about another 3 armies in there. He's got dwarves. Do I want dwarves, Neil? Do I want the Lord of the Rings dwarves? Moria dwarves?
He's got a dwarf.
Do I want to do Moria? Yeah, he's got a pile of dwarves.
Really? Well, that's quite tempting. That's actually very tempting. Do I need his email address? Dear Jeff, I hear you have dwarves.
So, Jeff, if you listen to this, up the price for Shook, and I'll take 10% off the top, okay, mate?
Kick the bummy.
It's only business, mate.
Yeah, it's only business. Nothing personal.
And on that note.
I think it's time for us to bring this section to a close. Yes, we've been busy. We've been playing a lot. We bought a lot.
Oh, don't remind me.
Mr. Luff is going for a lie down.
Mr. Luff has fallen off the wagon.
Indeed, he has.
Fallen off the wagon.
The floodgates opened, and boy did it open.
Everything was under control until The Godfather came out.
Never come to Wales, mate. It's a dangerous place.
Yes.
So we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we will be chatting with Sam Mustafa all about Rommel. We hope that you're enjoying this episode of the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. If you are, would you like to support us? There's a couple of ways of doing so. You can become a patron of the show by supporting us on our Patreon page. There you can give regularly every time we produce a show. Alternatively, you may want to give a one-off donation, and you can do that by using PayPal. For more details on both these options, please click on the Donate tab on our website www.meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. Have you ever wondered what's going on in wargaming? We do too. So come with us as we go behind the hobby with the Meeples and Miniatures interview. We'd like to welcome back to the Meeples and Miniatures podcast one of the guests who has not only come back for a second time, but even a third time of asking. It's Sam Mustafa. Hello, sir.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me back.
It's great to speak to you again. How have you been?
I've been wonderful. I just got back stateside, spent most of the summer in Germany. I finished an academic book, and I finished a war game.
Yeah, we last spoke to you on, when was it? Episode 179, I think it was, when we were chatting about Aurelian, Free Jumper, and yeah, you were just in the middle of writing this book at the time, weren't you?
Oh, my scholarly book. Yeah, well, that's been underway for 6 years. I've been doing the research on that for ages. It's important in academics that you devote the maximum possible time to something that earns the least amount of money. So I've been spending almost 7 years of my life working on something that, if I'm lucky, will earn me enough to buy one plane ticket. So yes, it's been a while. Yeah,
but that's now finished, is it?
It is finished. It is in the hands of the mighty Roman and Littlefield publishers, and they tell me that I think it'll be in their December catalog.
Excellent stuff. Excellent. And if people are interested in looking out for it, what's it called?
It is called Napoleon's Paper Kingdom, subtitle The Life and Death of Westphalia. So it's the first ever English language history of the Kingdom of Westphalia, Napoleon's puppet state that he gave to his little brother Jerome in 1807. And I take it from soup to nuts, the creation, different aspects of it, political, economic, military, social, linguistic, and take it down to the crash in 1813.
Cool. So now you devoted 7 years of your life to that particular tome. What on earth are you now going to do with your time?
I actually am in a weird for me anyway, a weird moment in which I don't have any major projects. There's nothing on the scholarly to-do list at the moment. There's a chapter that a colleague has asked me to contribute, but I can put that together relatively quickly. And there's no major games under development. I'm going to spend my time launching Rommel soon-ish, and I don't know. Might have to do some work around the house, God forbid.
You can come over here if you want, Sam. I've got a couple of bedrooms I need decorating. Bit of a waste of your skills.
Just quote around the word skills in that case, yeah.
Indeed. So, as you hinted at, the other thing we spoke about when we last spoke to you was the fact that at the time you were in the middle of the development of your new set of rules, Rommel, and so obviously that's pretty much at completions, which is why we invited you back on, so you could tell us all about it. We know probably a bit more than we otherwise would have done, since both of us were involved to a greater or perhaps lesser extent in some of the playtesting. I mean, we were discussing playtesting on another show that we did, and I know you did warn me, but I was quite I wasn't prepared for the pace of your playtesting.
I'm a ruthless taskmaster, yes.
You are. I think we found that out when by the time we got playtesting and results of the version of the rules that we were on, you'd moved on by like 2 or 3 versions, and you were onto something completely different, and it was like, oh, okay then. I just couldn't keep up.
Neil, you're a lovely man, but not everyone is cut out for the rigor of being an honor playtester. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think I have to put my hand up to that and kind of go, yeah, I think you're right on that one, Sam.
I did want to say, though, that I'm very, very grateful to the guys who have been with me for so long, and there's quite a diverse crew now from around the world in, I think, 6 countries, and some of these guys have been with me for 4 and 5 games, and if you look at the acknowledgments pages on the books, you'll see the same names coming up, and they still seem to have the bit between their teeth, God bless them. So I'm very, very grateful to the whole crew.
You do have a very good and very experienced group of playtesters there. It was a real honour just working amongst them and just arguing with them, which is always great fun. I love being able to argue with people who really know what they're talking about, and it's all done in a very well respectful manner, which is brilliant. And yeah, always good.
So it's not arguing; it's just robust discussion.
You went on the forum.
Yeah, as the the author, you ultimately have the editorial say, and sometimes you do get a kind of, you're in a sort of neutral position where playtester A really wants this and playtester B really wants that, and in some cases I don't want either. But in general, you have to take a side, and some guys can get miffed by that. But among this group, I think there's an understanding that sooner or later I have to make up my mind and not waste anybody's time. So I think there's a consensus that we come to 99% of the time.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. It's never acrimonious. It's always, but it's really interesting to chat to guys and get their opinions, and we always seem to know that standing above us is Sam with his pen ready to go, right, this is what we're doing. And as you say, it's usually something completely out of left field that we hadn't even thought about. And then we all just sort of sit back and go, well, that's a good idea.
Okay, so let's get on. Let's go on track up with what we're actually talking about, which is obviously a new set of World War II rules from yourself called Rommel. Now, we may have covered this back in our last podcast, but why World War II?
Well, I've always liked it. I'm not much of a skirmish game player. And it's not because I don't think they're good games. I think many of them are terrific games mechanically,
Mm-hmm.
But it's never been really my thing. I mean, when I think about battles in the Second World War, I'm often interested in something that resembles what you read when you read about battles and campaigns, the movement of entire battalions and divisions and even armies and so on. And it's not so much for me the movie perspective. I think a lot of recent World War II games have tried to achieve the sort of, squad of guys who were trying to take the church steeple approach. And that can be fun and exciting, but for me, it's quite limited. And even if I thought I had a really terrific skirmish game, I probably wouldn't go to the trouble and expense of trying to publish it just because that field is so saturated right now. There's a million good World War II skirmish games. What I've always wanted, and which frankly I've never found, was a tabletop operational level World War II game where I can command the entire Africa Corps, for example, or I could fight all of El Alamein, or the entire Normandy landings or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's the perspective of Rommel, and hence the name, right? I mean, he starts off as a divisional commander and ends up as an army commander. Honor games typically try to choose a person whose name conveys something like the role the player is going to take.
Okay, so we have World War II game, but something different from what most people would be currently used to, because obviously I think it's safe to say the vast majority of World War II war games that we've seen recently are very much aimed at either, as you say, platoon or either squad, platoon or company level, and this goes to something a little bit different, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, if you were to take, for example, a quote-unquote army from Flames of War, and it's something like a company, right? I mean, the average guy who has 15mm figures for that game, if he just ports those figures, his collection over to this game, to Rommel, he's got something like a Panzer Division. He's probably has more figures than he needs in some regards. So the collection of figures you've already got, whatever they're based for, whatever rules they're based for, can be plopped down in Rommel, and suddenly you're commanding entire divisions and corps.
And is that because each sort of unit in the game is representing a sort of supported company?
Right. So there's some necessary gray area here just because, you might be dealing with units that are depleted or amalgamated or whatever. But in general, you could say that one base is one unit, and that represents one company.
And then players would be, as you say, they would be commanding somewhere near a division, and we're playing the game over a large period of space, aren't we?
Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily have to be an entire division. There aren't really that many examples of every single element of a division taking part in the same fighting at the same time. More likely, you're commanding elements from several divisions. To give you some raw numbers, during the playtesting, as you recall, Mike, we did some of the Eastern Front scenarios. We had scenarios in which the Soviet player had something like 35,000 men. He had elements of several Guards tank corps, as well as some infantry divisions, up against maybe a Volksgrenadier division, a Panzer division, and some additional Germans trickling in the form of reinforcements. So, this is a 6'4" table, something you might use for your, World War II skirmish game of your choice. But when you use it in Rommel scale, you're now looking at 50,000 men, opposed on that field. The table, if players want to get a sense for what the table and the units look like, you can go to my website, sammustafa.com, and if you go to downloads and then click on Rommel, there's a bunch of freebies and things you can download, and there's a couple of scenarios you could look at. And I'm sure we'll get to this in a moment, but the scenarios have images of a table, and the table is divided into squares, each of which represents about 6 inches of table space in the basic game. And you can get a sense for how many units are going to be down there and what sort of size table you would need for the bases that you're using. The game is completely indifferent to your figure size, as are all my games. If you have very small figures, let's say 6mm on little 2-inch square bases, for instance, you could play with fairly small squares on a fairly small table, and you can do a big battle on your dinner table.
Yeah, because the sizes that you recommend are sort of a 6-inch square with the table containing 8x12 squares, so it's sort of 96 squares in total.
Right. That's sort of the point of reference in the basic game. I thought it would be useful, even though it really doesn't matter, I thought it would be useful to give a kind of point of reference in the basic game so that it's clear and people know where they could start. And then in the advanced rules, there are a bunch of options, options for playing the game with hexagons instead of squares, options for scaling up and scaling down. And I'm sure we can talk about that shortly, but in order to give people kind of a point of reference, I deliberately chose a size that looks good with 15mm figures because I assume that that's probably what most World War II players have. I realize there's a bunch of guys with smaller and a bunch of guys with larger figures, but there's so many guys who, like me, have multiple armies in 15mm that I use that as a kind of point of reference.
Yeah. So we mentioned that there's a grid. Why did you decide to go down the grid route?
Initially, we didn't. My early conception for the game was that it would be fairly traditional in the sense of, tape measures and rulers and measuring stuff. And I evolved away from that just because doing so massively simplified the game. For the price of 5 minutes extra setup time, in which you put little pebbles down and make square corners, you probably save something like an hour of playing time where you don't have to measure anything. There's no more finickiness, no more arguments about whether somebody is in the woods or not in the woods, or concealed or not concealed, or just enough to be on your flank, or you don't have to use a template for an artillery barrage or an airstrike and fiddle with it to say, okay, I've got exactly 4 enemy units under this barrage. All those things that require areas anyway become incredibly simple when you use a table that already has areas on it. And the kicker for me was when we realized that we really wanted to represent combined arms in a way that's different from horse and musket games. In a Napoleonics game, for example, combined arms means the infantry is here and the cavalry is nearby, right? Whereas in World War II, when we think of combined arms, we tend to think of, a platoon of tanks assisting a company of infantry, and they're intermixed, right? They're occupying the same physical space and operating as a single unit effectively. It's really hard to do that when you have a traditional game with tape measures and rulers, because you can't stack. Figures have to be somewhere. And if you can imagine putting the infantry on the left and the tank on the right and putting them base to base and saying, okay, we're operating as a combined arms team, there's a bunch of rules I would have to write for things like, well, what if the infantry's partly in the woods and the tank is not? What if we're attacked on the side where the infantry is, but something else shoots at us from the side where the tank is? By just using areas, we automatically create a combined arms team. Whoever is in that area is a team, right? They're fighting in that terrain, in that area as a team. It shortens the rules dramatically, and it makes things incredibly simple.
Yeah, it also simplifies terrain as well, doesn't it? Because you can just assign a type of terrain to one area.
Exactly. That's the basic game. In the advanced game, there's some options for making that a bit fuzzier, where you've got multiple terrain in one area. But in the basic game, yes, one area is a kilometer of the world, and there should be only one dominant terrain feature in that kilometer. And if you go into the enemy's square, you're fighting in that terrain against whatever he's got in that square. And I think a kilometer works pretty well also with regard to a decent battle area for World War II. And I know I'm going to get flack about this because I know, the German 88 had a range of 2.5 kilometers or whatever it was. Fine, but the huge majority of action that matters happens somewhere within a kilometer area or less.
Yeah, exactly, and it also I think simplifies the setup, because you're no longer worrying about running roads between villages and towns. You can literally almost have like a blank table and say, right, there's woods here, there's a range of mountains covering these 4 areas, there's a river which flows around this area, this part is Bocage, so it makes setting up the table, and it means that as a player you're concentrating not on the minute side of the tactical view, but you are looking at the whole strategic view, because such a large area.
A funny non sequitur. My wife and I do a lot of hiking, and we were recently hiking in the middle of nowhere in rural France, and we knew there was a town nearby. We had to get up on this mountain, and we figured this road is going the right way. We might as well take this road. And I remember thinking at the time that if this were a war game, right, and we were figures in this war game. I chose not to share this with my wife, by the way. But if we were figures in this war game, we'd be in wooded terrain at the moment, right? And this road is maybe a meter wide. It's a bunch of rocks, and no one is going to call this a road in their right mind. However, it will get us there eventually. And I was thinking that at the scale we are in Rommel, that wooded area probably has a couple of paths like that. There's roads everywhere, but they might not be very friendly to truck axles. They might divert you and take a long time. They might force you to get into a column where you're vulnerable to being ambushed. So I didn't feel the need to have a road or roads on the map. The terrain indicates what kind of road is available.
Yeah. I always thought when I was sort of playtesting it would be wonderful to actually play this on a massive 6x4 map and just sort of grid it out and then just mark what the individual major terrain features are, but I decided that was a bit of a silly idea, and I just went for basic grass map. But it does give you that sort of top-down view, which is very different to, I think, a lot of other games which are out there.
It makes some things so simple, like where do you place an objective marker? Well, you're not fiddling with a move. It can't be 6 inches from this and no more than 12 inches from that or whatever. It goes here, right? It goes in this area. Where's your supply source? Right here in this area. I know there's some guys will say, well, that's kind of board gamey to have areas, marked on the table, but so what? It's fun. It works well. And I think at the scale we're talking about, I wouldn't want to do it any other way.
Yeah, it definitely does work. Okay, so we've given sort of a very high level view of the game. So you are going to be playing over a large area, using a lot of assets, but still on a 6x4 table that can play out a game in a couple of hours. Yeah. Shall we get into some of the nitty gritty of the how the game actually works.
Sure.
No, I think it's probably best at this point if we. What do you think, Mike? Shall we look through a game turn and what that consists of?
Yeah, that sounds good. So I was going to say, is it worth mentioning the ops sheet, the command post?
Sure. Let's see if we can talk about these two things simultaneously, because they are sort of interlinked. And again, if there's anyone who is at home listening to this and you are sitting in front of your computer, if you want to go to my website and go to Downloads and then Rommel, you could download the quick reference sheet, QRS, and download the sample command posts. That's one PDF file with all the command posts, which I'll explain in a moment. And you can kind of follow along while I'm talking about this, and you see what I mean when I make reference to these steps and so on. A game turn is a non-discrete unit of time. I don't make any attempt to say it represents X minutes or whatever. The game tends to represent a day in the basic game, so we can sort of guesstimate from that, but it's not supposed to be one turn equals X minutes. Each side has what's known as a command post, and a command post is a single sheet of paper that serves as a way of keeping track of the important operations you do in the game. You have a box at the top called your ops file. Ops is the abbreviation for operations. And this is where you keep a number of dice. They don't have to be dice. You could use chits. Dice work nicely, though, because you can grab them and do stuff with them. In the basic game, the absolute limit for any player is no more than 10, can be sitting in that file. And then if you look down the command post, you'll see 3 columns of boxes. There are boxes known as events, and these often have different numbers of dice symbols in them. They cost a certain amount of ops. If this event has 2 dice symbols on it, then to invoke that event, you have to pay 2 ops. You take them out of that box and you take them out of the ops file and you put them in that box. And then there are offensive tactics and defensive tactics. And these are things you can use ops for to enhance combat or to try to foil the enemy in some way. The reason there are a lot of different command posts is that every army is different. There are certain core things they all have in common, but the different armies during the different periods of the war also have different tactics, different abilities that represent their use of certain kinds of weapons or their use of certain sorts of tactics or assets. For example, early war Germans are very different from late war Germans. The early war Germans have plenty of air support, for example, whereas the late war Germans don't. They have other assets that tend to be more defensive in nature, and so on. You can sort of imagine, based on what you know of the different armies at different periods of the war. All right, so a turn begins with what's known as operations phase. And I should specify that, like most of my games, it's an I go, you go game in the sense that I have my turn, you have your turn. I have my turn, you have your turn. So I might play all the odd number turns and you might play all the even number turns, for example. Mm-hmm. So my operations phase, the first thing I have to do is decide whether or not I want to reset my command post. Resetting means that I sweep all the ops off the post. It's clean, and I get to roll more ops and put them in my box. Now, why wouldn't you do that? The reason you wouldn't want to do that is that if you do reset, you get very few ops in that turn. If you don't reset, well, eventually the boxes on the command post begin to fill up. For example, if you look at a command post and you see in a tactic called airstrike, once you use it and you put that die in there, the die stays there, meaning you can't use it again until you've reset the command post. So eventually you run out. So you've filled up all the boxes. Now you can string this along indefinitely, if you have other things you need to use the ops for, and we'll get to that shortly. But eventually you're going to want to reset and clear that command post and get more. And that represents a kind of operational pause. There's a big disadvantage to doing it. It forces you to sort of take a pause in the game, but you really need to do it eventually. The timing is going to be up to you. So that's the first thing you have to decide whether or not you're going to do. Following the operations phase, you have the events phase. And this is where you can, if you wish, take ops to invoke events. Events tend to be powerful things that benefit you in some way. Again, the armies have certain ones in common and others are unique to their nationality or their period. For example, there's one called reorganizing infantry. As infantry units take hits and get worn down, the event can help bring them back to shape. Right, you're devoting operational energy to try to reorder and rally these guys.
Mm-hmm.
Different armies have different events that have different levels of power. For example, the late war allies have a bunch of nasty air power events. They can call down on German columns out of the blue and do nasty things to them. And again, this is up to you. You don't have to do it. You can do more than one if you want, or you can save your ops dice for something else. You may then, if you want, invoke a road movement phase. There's no roads on the board, but if you invoke a road movement phase, it costs ops to do, and all those units that are eligible to use road movement may do so. It's a bit risky. You have to be not adjacent to the enemy. Using it enables you to travel very far, obviously, especially if you're motorized. But the unit ends tipped. We take the unit or unit card and turn it at an angle instead of facing a side of the square to show that it's in this vulnerable road column. It might be vulnerable to an airstrike, or particularly vulnerable if the enemy breaks through and attacks it. But it's the quickest way to move. And then you have the tactical phase or phases. Now, everything I've mentioned requires ops. So if you're thinking about this, if you're looking at the command post, you've only got 10 at a maximum in that box. You obviously can't do anywhere near everything you want to do in a given turn. You might be conserving your ops because there's some really juicy tactic you want to use on a particular assault, but that means it comes at a cost of some other sort of operational opportunity. The tactical phase is where you can move adjacent to and into the enemy's face, as it were, into his square. Otherwise, you can't get adjacent to him. The game does not really have a rule where you have to stop in the enemy zone of control. That rule is unnecessary because getting near him, you're limited to this short tactical movement. It's the only way you can attack the enemy. If you did attack the enemy in a tactical phase, you have to resolve those combats. And then if you want to, you can have another tactical phase. Each tactical phase costs more ops than the one before it. So there's a natural limit here. If you are incredibly lucky rolling the new ops, and if you're good at conserving them, you could, at a maximum, have up to 4 tactical phases in a turn, but that's under perfect conditions. And the more difficult things you try to do, the more ops they cost. That includes moving through difficult terrain or moving near the enemy and so on. So having multiple tactical phases enables you to break through, for instance. Sometimes units fail in their assault and they fall back tipped and they can't do anything, but in the advanced game there's other things you can do with ops to get them going again. But basically you should try to plan your turn in a way that you've set up a really great attack. You use certain units to break through, you use other units then to exploit, and you play exactly the tactics and the events you need, and you try to steal the momentum from the enemy in that way. Finally, then you have your status phase. We see if you've won the game or not. And then there's what's known as a marker step, which is mostly for the advanced game for things like engineering or, mine clearing and stuff like that. And then it's your turn.
Okay, let's take a little step back, because you mentioned rolling ops. So at the beginning of the phase, you get a number of ops dice. So usually, if you haven't reset your board, you get 3 ops dice, don't you?
You get 6.
6, sorry.
Yeah. If you get 3 if you did reset the board.
If you did reset, sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
So you take your 6 dice, and then you have to roll them. And if you roll a 1, the dice are discarded, and if you rolled anything higher than 1, which most people will, unless they're Mr. Shuck,
thanks.
Those dice get put into the command post, into the ops file, so they're ready, so that they become a resource that you can then use during your turn. Correct.
And of course, the advanced game takes advantage of the flexibility of this, and that you could have a really great commander who's can roll more or gets to hold on to more, or we have scenarios where maybe think of the Germans on the first day of the Battle of the Bulge. They have this sort of strategic surprise, and they can start with more than the normal maximum in their file or whatever. So it's an easy game mechanic to fiddle with to achieve different scenarios, that you want to in which you want to represent one side having an advantage for a period of time.
Yeah, and what you're obviously trying to do is to build up the number of ops that you've got in your ops file, so that you can then use those resources to do something stunning instead of sort of. So you tend to sort of early on do your road movements, try and get your troops into position so that they're ready to attack, and then once you've built up your ops, you've done an event, you can then do, as you say, those multiple tactical phases by spending your ops, and then doing some combats, trying to push the enemy out of the way, trying to break through. No, sooner or later you are going to end out of ops, run out of ops, and you then got to reset and can go again.
Right. There's a basic trade-off here between movement and everything else. Right. It takes ops to move, whether by road or during tactical, and then everything else, all the goodies, right? They take ops as well. And we've talked about this for a long time during playtesting, and we got it the way we like it. Essentially, what we're trying to convey here is the more care you make in preparation, the more goodies you can do. Are you a Monty or a Rommel? If you're the Monty, then you're probably not going to play multiple tactical phases. You're going to play one tactical phase with all sorts of nice stuff added to it. You prepared, you've cleared the minefields, you've got lots of artillery support, you've got lots of air cover, and you're going to really try to blast the enemy, having set up this nice set-piece battle. If you're the Rommel player, you can do without the goodies, but you really can't miss that opportunity to make a sprint for the objective, or to get around the enemy's flank or something like that. But, moving more means you miss opportunities that would be available to you if you were willing to move less. And we like that. It's a nice trade-off between the luxury of sitting still and the need to be in motion.
Yeah, exactly. So from a game perspective, how does this work? Do you have a certain number of units that you can have in a particular square? Do you tackle square to square, or?
Right. So for lack of a better term, and I know this is going to cost me customers, but I use the term stacking. I'm sorry. I know it's a board game term. But yeah, there's a basic stacking limit in the basic game of 3 units. So something like a battalion, right? If we think that a unit is a reinforced company, then something like a full strength battalion with some extra kit is maybe at most 1,000 men is occupying that square on each side. And then, yes, you move from square to square, diagonally or ordinally. There's relatively few restrictions on how you can move. If you imagine a checkerboard, if you could imagine 2 enemy squares occupied diagonally, then you can't move across that corner at which their corners touch. You can't squeeze between them like that. There's a couple special events and tactics that let you do it with proper reconnaissance and so on, but those are exceptions. Other than that, you can sort of scoot around however you want. And we did that because we're looking at large areas, and also because why delay the player from getting into contact? This is a war game. We do this because we want to fight battles. Mm-hmm. I guess one other point to mention, during playtesting, we experimented with the possibility of not moving diagonally, and that felt more like 1916 than 1942. And so we just sort of agree that, if you're moving diagonally, it's not Pythagoras' ideal solution, right? Because you're sort of cheating distance a little bit if you move diagonally. Mm-hmm. But it speeds the game along, and it makes it feel more like mobile warfare.
Yeah. So during the tactical phase, units that are in these squares can move independently. So you don't have to move everything in one square as a group. You can move the individual figures, from square to square. They've each got their own movement values of sort of 1 or 2.
Yeah, tactical movement is very simple. I mean, armor units and guys in half tracks can move 2. Everybody else can move 1. If you want to move more than that, use road movement. Yeah. But yes, to attack the enemy, you move into his square and you fight him on the terrain that he chose.
Okay, so it's not the battle does not take place on the border of a square. It takes place in the square you're moving into.
Correct.
Right. Because I know that changed during playtesting.
Yeah, and there's all sorts of reasons. I don't want to bore the listeners with sort of the long history of the playtesting debates about this, but essentially we had to get to a place where there was a reason for the stacking limits for both sides. You know, if in a traditional war game in hexagons, you know, if you sort of got your nose sticking out, I could attack you from 4 different hex sides. I could get something like 6-1 odds on you, or something like that. And it didn't make sense. If you can only fit 3 units in this square, then really I ought to be only able to fit 3 as well. So it made more sense with regard to where supporting bombardment is happening. It's happening in that terrain, where an airstrike might be happening, and where the attacker has to go in order to fight the defender. You know, if you're dug in the woods, for instance, then you, the defender, really ought to be rewarded for that. You know, if I'm dumb enough to send my tanks into the woods, I, the attacker, should be punished for that. It doesn't matter that my tank came from clear. It matters that you're in the woods. So in that sense, the game favors the defender. In the sense that the attacker can keep hammering away with multiple tactical phases, the game favors the attacker, but only if he's smart enough to pile up enough operations to be able to do it.
Hmm.
And is there a maximum number of units that you can attack into a square?
Yeah, it's 3. So, you know, the stacking limit for both sides in any given square is the same.
Okay, cool. Next big question is, how does combat work?
I don't want to get too much in the weeds of this. I'll tell your listeners again, if they're able on the computer, or if they want to make a note of this, go to sammustafa.com and go to downloads. The entire chapter, the combat chapter in the book, is available free, right? So you can just download that whole chapter and read it. The quick version is units have a basic strength. It's on a little 3-box track, which as they take hits, they degrade and their strength decreases. And then they have various traits. If you've played my game Blucher, you know that the unit cards in Blucher have these traits for things. There's lots of traits in Rommel, particularly in the advanced rules. You know, there's traits for pioneers, for instance, who are better at assaulting certain kinds of defensive positions. There are traits for, you know, infantry and half-tracks. There are traits for tanks, for their armor value and for their firepower. There are traits that represent leg infantry as opposed to motorized infantry, and so on. You tally up your combat factors. I look at mine. We look to see if those traits affect you or me in the terrain in which we're fighting. We contribute eligible artillery, both defender and attacker. And then we secretly look at our command posts, and you can just cover this with a cup or with your hand or whatever. You can choose any tactics you want to use in that combat. If I'm the defender, I'm choosing defensive tactics. If you're the attacker, you can only choose your offensive tactics. We simultaneously reveal what, if any, tactics we chose. And then we resolve the combat, each by rolling a die. Generally, combat is simultaneous, but there are some tactics that enable me to shoot first or you to shoot first, and that could reduce you before you can get in. For example, I might call down a punishing barrage that breaks up one of your attacking units and he doesn't get into the combat at all. My reconnaissance might enable me to shoot first if I had better reconnaissance there than you do. But in general, we then take hits on our units, and if the defender is still there and chooses not to retreat, all the attackers must retreat. That results in them being tipped as if they had just used road movement, and therefore they can't move again in this turn. Like if you chose a second tactical phase, those guys are spent for the turn. Being tipped is tricky because you don't get to untip until your next turn. So if you really got clobbered attacking my position, and if I've got some sort of reserve, I'm in a nice position to counterattack now if I want to come out of hiding, because your units are sort of recovering from this botched attack. So there's hopefully a kind of natural give and take. Particularly, this is great in the desert scenarios or those scenarios on the Russian steppes with lots of tanks, because it really gets mobile after a while.
Oh, it definitely does. Definitely does do that. Okay, so you play that and then you retreat back. So, as you say, if you wanted to do a secondary attack, you need to have untipped units or units which haven't been in combat yet. You need to do a second tactical phase.
Yeah, you need not only to pay the ops for a second phase, but you better have a second wave ready, right? If your first wave is now spent, And again, we like the way this played out in the play testing. It's necessary to soften up the enemy. The Soviets proved to be very Soviet in this regard, right? They have a lot of cheap infantry, and they have to throw wave after wave at the Germans. The Germans tend to have, in the late war anyway, some good defensive tricks up their sleeve. And, the Soviets need to throw a battalion in first, knowing it's going to get chewed up, but then that second wave is going to come in and hopefully break through.
Yeah, and it definitely does allow players to use the combined arms. You're going to have, in one square, you're going to have 3 units. You may have 2 infantry and an armored platoon, an armored company doing the attack. You've got your artillery, behind the lines who are firing in to support the attack. It really does give you that feel of using the right resource at the right time to try and, make a breakthrough or at least soften up and then do a secondary attack if you've planned it properly.
Yeah, and that's also dependent on knowing your army. The Soviets, for example, have gobs of artillery. But for the most part, the Soviet army is limited to only using them on the first tactical phase of a turn. Only their little guns are flexible enough to fire in defense or, to fire throughout the turn. So they fire these huge program barrages like rocket launchers and 152s and so on for that first wave attack. Whereas, the British, for example, are quite mobile. They have a much, typically a smaller army, but it's very mobile, has a lot more tactical flexibility, and they're quicker to react to changing situations.
Yeah, indeed. One thing we haven't discussed, which when you're looking at combat at this level, supply, because keeping your lines of supply is very important. So how have you sort of taken that into account in the rules?
Yeah, we went through a whole lot of versions of this, and I wanted to simplify. We kept coming up with versions that involved bean counting, keeping track of counters or chits that represent supply, and it's just way more trouble than it's worth, I think. And it's also so hard to balance. Does my tank use 1 chit worth of gas if I move 1 square? Does it use 1 chit if I move 6 squares? I didn't want to get into that. So we use a simple rule where each side has at least 1 supply source. It's some exit point on the edge of the table. And then the use of areas makes it wonderfully simple to trace a supply line. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of how it's done and the exceptions, but you trace a supply line, basically. There's an additional consideration, though. Units can be in supply or out of supply, but we assume that if you start the if you start the game in supply, you have enough supply to fight for a day. So running out of supply is something that tends to happen only in the advanced game with multiple day battles, or perhaps you drop paratroopers behind enemy lines and they've run out of supplies on the second day or something like that. The question of being isolated, however, was important. We wanted there to be some penalty for units that can't trace a line of supply at the moment, even though they're not out of gas or out of bullets. So if a unit can be isolated at any given moment, meaning it can't trace that line of supply, which means it's cut off from communicating with headquarters, or it can no longer see friendlies or whatever. And that, it doesn't punish it in combat, but it punishes you in the sense that it requires more ops to get those units to do things. So you can get temporarily cut off. You're not in danger of running out of supply, but now it is a hassle because you've been temporarily cut off. And it's a sort of administrative punishment for you not keeping your army intact. And this can change very quickly from turn to turn. I didn't want to make a kind of bean counting exercise out of it. So using the ops is just a sort of natural mechanic that's already built into the game that can represent the difficulty of getting guys going when they can't figure out where the enemy is or where the friendlies are.
Of course, that works both ways in the fact of, if you have an enemy that is perhaps overly aggressive and extends themselves deep into enemy territory, you can then break through that attack, cut their lines of supply, cause them to be isolated as part of your defensive tactics, can't you? So it works both ways around, doesn't it?
Yeah, and again, the particularly in those scenarios that have a lot of mobile units, the sort of southern Russia scenarios or the North African scenarios where everybody's motorized. There's a lovely kind of swirling characteristic on these big open battlefields without much terrain, and everybody's got wheels, where you're generally trying to not just to hurt the enemy, but to hassle him, to harass him, and to make him uncertain of your next move and intentions, and to make him burn through his administrative assets more quickly than you are.
Yeah, oh yeah, Lord save us from marauding companies of T-34s. Yes.
Right, or how did those Panzer IIIs suddenly show up, adjacent to our artillery park?
Indeed.
Yeah, and it does happen, and like I say, when we were testing, we were doing a lot in the Russian campaign because I've got a lot of Russian stuff, and it was really interesting to doing a mass attack against a German defended line. And the Russians were, for multiple turns battering against this line until the line very slowly starts to crumble. And then the next thing you know, you're getting units of T-34s rushing through into the rear. And it's all open because the Germans have had to throw in their reserves to hold this defended line. And suddenly, the T-34s are rushing through, cutting off lines of supply, taking objectives. And the game just turned really, really quickly. And it was fascinating to watch.
You're watching my game with Dave then, were you, Mike?
One of the things I like about, I can't take credit for this, one of our playtesters came up with it, about defensive positions. We have these markers that represent dug-in or defensive positions or, pillboxes or whatever. And they are expended like resources. As the enemy batters them, it's not just the defending units, but it's the defensive positions themselves that begin to become battered and go away. And so eventually that line will break. The defender runs out of advantages after a while, but it can be very bloody.
Oh, it can be. And you really have to be careful not to throw too much into one place, because you can just find yourself exhausted, literally blown. You may have driven the enemy away, but you've got nothing left to capitalize on that, which means that it then gives your opponent a chance to regroup and do a counterattack.
Yeah, you generally, if you're attacking, you generally need to decide who's going to be the assault troops and who's going to be the breakthrough and exploitation.
What would Stalin do is a big question.
he would shoot half of his own side first.
Exactly. So there's lots and lots of rules in here for. Well, actually, there's not an awful lot of rules in it because it's a very simple game to play. But there's an awful lot in here that allows you to, just in the basic game, to actually play on that strategic level. I mean, you can reorganize your troops as well. So if troops have taken damage or taken hits, you can use your ops to reinforce them and get them back up to a better level, which means that they're able to take part in the ongoing campaign. You've got objectives that, which are usually towns, cities, or, important strategic areas which one side has to hold and the other side wants to try and take. But it's, that's just in the basic game. We've also then got the advanced game rules, which we've sort of chatted about quickly, but it's worth spending a bit of time looking at what else is in the advanced game.
Sure, yeah. The advanced rules are divided into thematic sections. There's a section that is just introducing more flavor, for example, all kinds of new traits. For example, you could have unreliable vehicles like the early Panthers at Kursk, or something like that. You could have units that are particularly shaky, maybe those conscripted Ost battalions at Normandy or something like that. You can have entire units of cavalry or lightly armored tank hunters or dedicated reconnaissance units or assault engineers or stuff like that. So there's a whole section that offers you more of that. There's an additional section that offers you more activities to do with your ops. For example, engineering. You can blow things up. You can build things. You can, put bridges across rivers. you can have amphibious assaults, you can have airborne assaults, you can have boat crossings, and et cetera, et cetera. So there's that section. And then you've got the sections that I call the open architecture. So one thing I didn't want to do, I didn't want to try to make the book a kind of encyclopedia of every sort of unit that fought in World War II. And I guess we should say that this is really only the European and Mediterranean theater of operations. There are no Japanese and Chinese in this book. I knew that there's a division for everybody, right? Your all-time favorite unit might be the Soviet Airborne Division, or that one SS Cavalry Division, or the Romanian Armor, something like that. I knew I couldn't fill the book to bursting with that. And I didn't want to get into the business of trying to sell endless codexes and upgrading it. So I decided to create 14 army lists, essentially. And these are the 6 big powers at 3 different periods of the war. So it's the British, the French, the Germans, the Italians, the Soviets, and the Americans. Divided into the 3 periods of the war gives 14 different armies. And then I just, in each chapter in the advanced rules, I give you the open architecture, all the math of how I arrived at the various values and how you can do it if you want. So if you really want to have a Finnish army, for instance, or if you want to create a special unit the game doesn't have, like there's no German cavalry division in the book. I know there were a couple of German cavalry divisions. I just didn't put them in the book. If you want to create them, everything you need is there. There's rules for cavalry. The point values are there, and so on. If you really think the Slovakian units need their own lists, by all means, go ahead. Then I have a fictional point-based system for pickup games and club games. The open architecture, again, allows you to change it. You can adjust the point values accordingly. For example, if you can persuade your friends that the King Tiger was not really as unreliable as the game says it is. If your friends agree, you can change the trait, get rid of the unreliable trait, adjust the points. It won't break the game. There's historical scenario construction. I give 2 samples. There's one online and one in the book. The one in the book is also online, so if you want that one. It walks you through how to do a historical scenario. And then there's a fictional scenario generation system that, if I can say so, I'm sort of proud of. Instead of starting with fixed armies and fixed scenarios, there's a bidding system for points. Unlike most games that use point systems, you don't have to play the same number of points. In fact, I've never seen that done. You create the army you really like. You point it up. There's a range. You can go from X to Y. It's a pretty big range, though. And then the guy who has fewer points gets various advantages. The more difference you have in terms of inferior number of points, the more control you have over what scenario you play, what the terrain is going to be, what the victory conditions will be. So I might go in with an army that's only 80 points. You might have one that's 130 points, but that means I pick the scenario, I pick the side of the table, I pick most of the terrain, I control the victory conditions, and I might be forcing you into a very difficult role, and you're going to need all those points. So you might want to build a huge horde and just bash your way forward, and I might want to build a small elite force that has a lot of tricks up its sleeve. But essentially, the game adjusts to balance the smaller army, and that guy is controlling the scenario. He's going to decide probably he wants to be the defender, but maybe not. So I really like that. I think it's worked out wonderfully during playtesting, and it never gets old because you never have to say, oh, let's just do a 1,500 point game and play scenario number 8. It just doesn't happen that way.
So the book contains 8 different scenarios, and as you say, you've got all of the army creation information in there, so it's going to be easy for people to get going. They can create their own divisions as well. I mean, the book is about 140 odd pages long.
Yeah, that's with all the indexes and extra stuff at the end. Yeah.
It's pretty much all you need, isn't it?
Well, you need to go online and download the command posts. I mean, it's the only thing you have to buy, right? Aside from figures, obviously, but you can go online and download all the command posts for free. And there's a bunch of other freebies if you want to. If you don't like using the little cards on the basis of your units, there's a roster you can use instead. So there's various extras, but the book is the only thing you have to buy.
That was one thing I was going to come back to, because there's a lot going on within the game. Although the rules themselves are relatively simple, there is an awful lot going on. So what sort of level of record keeping have we got?
Well, you need to know what unit you're looking at and what condition it's in. All right. So every infantry and armor units have a 3-step track, and that declines in quality. For example, a typical leg infantry unit might be a 4-3-2. When it's fresh, it's got a basic strength of 4. It loses a hit, now it's a 3. It loses another. If it loses that last box, boom, it's gone. At a minimum, you need to know where your unit is in terms of that track. Now, one of the British playtest groups, they just hate anything that takes away from the aesthetic of the game. So, for example, they don't use a square grid. They have little white dots on their terrain board showing where the corners are for the squares, and that's all. And then they don't use any labels at all on the miniatures. They use 6mm figures because they like the diorama look of multiple tanks and so on.
Yeah.
And they just have a little identifying number in the corner of the base, and then they use a roster. And actually, I think they got away from doing even that. They just would put a little marker on the base showing what the status of the unit was as it takes hits, and when it gets a certain number of markers, it goes away. So you've got a lot of options here. I don't mind markers. They stick out underneath the base of my figures, and I just put a pencil and mark the track as it goes down. But the marker allows you to see the traits at a glance also. If you can't remember, you probably can remember. If you build your army, you're going to know what your army is. You're going to know that, the Tiger is a 5 and the Sherman is a 3 or whatever. But if you do need to remember, you've got multiple ways you can depict that. On the downloads page, you can download a bunch of blank templates to make your own unit cards, which can act as labels. If you really want to try the game on the cheap, you don't need any figures at all. You can just print out the unit cards from one of the scenarios and put them on any table at all and just see if you like the game, but without having to put any sort of figures or terrain down at all. But come on, use a tank or two.
I based mine. I used all my old GHQ 128 or 185, sort of 6mm. So, but I used big bases, so I got 80mm by 60mm bases with 3 or 4 tanks on there and some infantry, so that you get that lovely sort of diorama approach. And then, as Sam says, that little label just stuck underneath at the bottom, just with the tracker on it, so I could see the important information, and it played fantastically. And it looked good as well, which is the other important thing. But it works equally as well if you're using 15mm, 20mm. As long as you can get three bases into a 6-inch square. That's what
and you can squeeze your figures into 4-inch squares. We wanted to do a market garden scenario at one point during the play testing, so we wanted a long, narrow board. Right. And so we used 4-inch squares. And at this point, I'd like to do a little shout out to my friends, Chris and Corey at Cigar Box Battle, because they have been making some terrain mats with Rommel in mind. And they sent me a couple, and I've been using them in the photographs for the book, and they look great. The lines are very thin. They don't offend the eyes. They're all earth tones. So, if you stand back a few feet, you can't see the grid at all. But when you look at it, you can see there's a square grid. But we used the 4-inch squares and did a long end-to-end, the road, right, in Market Garden. Yeah. And we had the British 30 Corps trying to reach the American 101st as these various German battle groups were on the flanks trying to break that line. And the issue of cutting off supply and isolating units was really important. The Germans don't have a hope in hell of stopping 30 Corps, but they can really mess with 30 Corps. And they can really make the British life miserable because they've got, the forest comes near the roads at certain points, giving great ambush positions. And these little German Kampfgruppen can pop out and do damage. But you get a real sense for the importance of road movement when you play with smaller squares and stretch the game out like that. And also for the range of artillery. In the basic game, artillery, with the exception of rocket launchers, artillery reaches the entire table. But when you play with smaller squares or with a bigger table, then it matters. You need to move up the guns, and that takes a while.
Oh, it does. Yeah. So with your previous games like Blucher and Maurice, you produce cards. Now, I'm kind of guessing with the sheer amount of unit types in a World War II game, that's not something you're going to be doing for Rommel?
I'm leaving the door open to that. I would like to keep the cards physically small if I can. The unit cards that you have for free as a template are less than half the size of a poker card. They just peek out the bottom of a base of miniatures. Imagine a little 2-inch wide base of 15 millimeter infantryman. The unit card just sort of peeks out the one end of that. If we were to do unit cards in packs, here's a German Fallschirmjäger division, right? Here is a Soviet Guards tank army. Those would be larger, right? They'd have to be the size of poker cards. Otherwise, they wouldn't work in terms of cost. So I haven't said no. It's interesting. I want to see how the game does. And if there's a demand for something like that, I kind of have a feeling that so many gamers already have World War II kit that they're probably going to want to play with miniatures instead of cards. Yeah, it's not like Napoleonics where a new player faces this immense cliff to climb where he's got to paint 1,000 figures. It takes him a year and so on before he can play. World War II, everybody's got a handful of World War II figures. You can start somewhere. Rommel doesn't require a lot of figures to have a pretty big army.
That is true. Yeah. No, I think that's a wise way, and it's so easy to either do a roster or to print off the unit cards and just stick them underneath your bases. It literally takes a 2-minute job to do.
To give you an example, for my collection, I have 18 bases of German grenadiers, right? I painted them up fairly recently. So imagine like a Flames of War size 2-inch wide base. I have 18 of them, right? Pick any book off your shelf. They will all fit on the cover of that book, right? That's not a lot of figures. That is a Volksgrenadier division in Rommel. I mean, minus the artillery. A couple more bases of artillery, and that is any Volksgrenadier division at Normandy, right? It's technically 4 companies in a battalion, but the Germans were under strength, so more like 3. 6 battalions in a division, 6 times 3 is 18. That's a division, right? So you don't need a lot of figures.
No, that's right. Okay, so I suppose the biggest question really is where can we get them?
At the moment, nowhere. At the time we're recording this podcast in early August, they are on a boat. They're heading across the Atlantic. So probably by the time this airs, it'll be available. I am thinking sometime in September. I don't have a date yet because I'm at the mercy of customs and port, freight forwarders and so on. Mm-hmm. But you can get them from me, obviously, www.sammustapha.com. The usual suspects among retailers in your country. So Eureka Games will have them in Australia. There'll be, I think, 2 or 3 retailers that are going to have them in the UK. I will send out a link and also post links on my website. There'll be a retailer in Canada, and there'll be multiple American retailers that will have them as well. The US price of the book is $40, but I have no control over what anyone else charges for the product in any other country in any other currency. So I know I say this every time. I always get these angry emails from some guy in, Azerbaijan saying, "What? You 65 gulaks for this game? You must be out of your mind." I have no control over what anyone else charges for the game. So don't complain if your local retailer charges 65 gulaks. It'll be $40 US.
Well, that's for 144 page. Similar size to Blucher?
Right. It's a B5 hardback full color book. It's 144 pages, right?
Yeah. And it's got everything in there.
I know I only played one of the earlier playtest versions of it. I must admit, I thoroughly enjoyed it when we played it.
Thank you.
It takes a bit getting your head around. If you've only ever played like company and platoon level games, it does take a little bit more getting your head around. especially when you have to start, especially when you start thinking about lines of supply and various other bits and pieces. But having said that, a couple of games in, and it is loads of fun. As you say, it really does capture that larger operational feel without going into some of the more, shall we say, some of the more paperwork heavy sets of wargames rules that we have for that level of game out there.
Yes, I don't think there's a whole lot of games at this scale, period, right? I mean, I know there have been people in the past who have taken a stab at it, and there's some sort of home-brewed, games you can download for free at this level. But, I may be forgetting somebody, but I can't think of anything published in the last 10 or 15 years that treats World War II at this scale for a tabletop game.
As I say, short of looking at kind of hex and counter style war games, which again, more often than not tend to take a step further back up than this, then this is something relatively unique as far as tabletop miniatures games is concerned, which is not a bad thing.
If you are a skirmish game player, then I can understand that you might miss, knowing that there's a 10 millimeters more armor on the Mark IV-G than there was on the Mark IV F2. Something like that. It's just not what Rommel's about. We recalibrate the tank values for each period of the war to show relative advantage or disadvantage. So that T-34 in the early war is a really great tank. The T-34 in the mid-war is a normal tank, and the T-34 in the late war needs an upgrade. Right. Beyond that, it would be crazy to try to get into the nitty-gritty of whether or not these Stugs have the Schutzen on the side of them or not. That's just not the place for a game at this scale. Sure. Much more important questions like, do you have fuel?
So that's all should be available late August, early September.
Let's say September, because I can't promise what'll happen. With Blucher, for example, they sat in the port for 6 weeks while there was a dock workers strike. So, being the pessimist that I am, let's say September.
Okay, fantastic. So we mentioned at the start of the show that you found yourself at a point where actually you didn't have a lot on since you just finished your book. And obviously we're at a point where Rommel is now at a point where, okay, it's back on its way from the boat, ready to be published. So, what is next on your list? I mean, have you got anything in the pipeline at all?
Actually, I don't. I'm laughing because I saw that question coming from about 8 miles away, and there's nothing I could do to stop it. It was heading toward me like a train. So there are a couple of games that I've been fiddling with just among my friends. I'm always coming up with weird stuff. One of them is, I should say this or not, one of them is a sci-fi sports game with tongue planted firmly in cheek. One of them is a purely card game. It's about politics, not current day politics, but long. It's about trying to stop the Nazis from coming to power in Weimar Germany. But I have, in terms of real war games at the moment, no. There's a little file I keep on my computer with things to do one of these days. Mm-hmm. And various people have suggested various things, and they made their way onto that list, but I haven't pulled the trigger on any of them. I'm a little bit tired, if the truth be told. I've done 9 games now in 12 years. Mm-hmm. So I hope my customers will forgive me if there's a bit of a pause between this and the next game.
What's this you think about taking a holiday? Good grief.
Well, this is my second job, right? So many people know that my day job is mild-mannered history professor. So there's that. I tend to do most of my work in the summer as a result, because that's when I don't have students. But I'm sure I'll be back. I just don't know what I'll have in my hand when I come back. It probably will be sooner than later, given the fact that I'm a restless person. But I don't have a coming next pitch. It's just Rommel.
Well, Sam, it's been fantastic for you to come back on the show and to catch up with you again. It's been great to chat, so thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
No, it's really enjoyed it. And of course, if people haven't had their fill of Sam on a podcast, you have in fact done a couple of your own promoting Rommel as well, haven't you?
Yeah, there's now 3 Rommel-specific podcasts on the Honor website, sammustafa.com. Just click on podcasts. The most recent 3 are all about Rommel. The second of those 3 is the How to Play. Mm-hmm. So if you want, you can download the command post and the sequence of play, and that podcast will walk you through step by step in a more complete way because we have more time to do so. So you can walk through the scenario creation and the sequence of play and pretty much the whole basic game that gets narrated on that podcast.
Yeah. Cool. As I say, it's been great to chat again. Thank you so much. We want to wish you all the very best with all. I think it's safe to say, both myself and Mr. Hobbs, to say we both played it. We've really enjoyed it. So, Mr. Hobbs?
Yeah, it's a great game. It really is. Changes how you look at World War II.
Well, thank you so much for the nice words and for the chance to be on the show again.
It's been great. We've really enjoyed it. So, all the very best, and we hope to catch up with you again in the near future.
All right. I'll let you know when I got something new. Bye-bye, guys.
That's great. Thank you.
Good.
So, are you going to use your existing figures for Rommel, Mr. Hobbs, or are you going to playing it in another scale?
No, I'm using my existing ones. I got a load of GHQ 6mm, which I've
I'd forgotten
done the bases for.
I'd forgotten about those. I was just thinking of
your. I pointed out those boxes underneath my table.
oh yeah. I was thinking of your 15 and 20s.
No. I'm going to do it on 80 by 60 bases with nice little dioramas on each one. I've done most of my armies already. They're in those boxes that were underneath the table.
Ah, right, okay. Oh, did that include the Russian box that you dropped, or was that, or were they 15s?
Those are the 15s. The
that
Russian
was
box.
15s. Oh, okay, yeah. Interesting game, something completely different.
It is. It's a good game. Really interesting. And I mean, the thing we didn't touch on that I think Ty mentioned this when we were doing playtesting was it would make a really good campaign.
Yes. Because
you could literally play a turn, pick out some of the battles from that turn, and easily transpose them onto a tabletop. And maybe not do all of them, because if you've got three companies or 3 support companies going in, it's quite a lot for any normal game. But you could, use that as an idea for sort of drilling down for for designing scenarios for Chain of Command or Iron Being Shotman or Battle Group or any of those sort of games.
Yeah, that's a really good idea, actually. Yeah, you could do that and even almost to have it as you could play the campaign game almost on like a wall chart with chits, or couldn't you? And then and then have it as so Rommel is your big game, except for the fact that when you come down to when it comes down to combat, you then zoom in.
Yeah, I mean you wouldn't do it for every single one because you'd be there for years.
You would,
but during one of the tactical phases, there's going to be sort of battles that are going to jump out, like the important ones, and they'd be like, these would be really good to transpose this down and sort of try and put it onto the tabletop. And even if you don't use the results from that game, but it just gives you a nice little narrative for the campaign.
6mm World War II, Mr. Luff, what do you reckon?
Yeah, only if we knew someone that did 6mm World War II.
But you can do it with your 15s. Looks lovely with 15mm.
Here we go. I'm sure we've got enough between us. So, Rommel. Worth checking out, I think. Yeah, give that a go. Yes. Well then, we're about done.
So you have been.
Wallace have been.
Yeah, one of us has been. Most definitely.
Oh, well. Never mind.
Oh, well.
There's a Wood Elf army on sale on eBay for £39. 60 plus model.
Wood Elf army?
Yeah. No, walk away.
Go on, Dave. You know you want to. Go on, Dave. Bite now, Dave. Bite now. And while you hear the sound of Luff slowly going over the edge and joining the rest of us.
No. I'm pretty sure normal service will resume very quickly.
Yeah. Boo hiss. Never mind. And on that bombshell, we'll call it a night. So, I want to say thank you to Mr. Luff. Nice to have you back, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, go and have a lie down, mate.
I'm going to need one.
And thank you once again to the Welsh Wizard himself. Thank you, Mr. Hobbs.
I blame the Welsh Wizard. It wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for him inviting us over.
It's all his fault. Yes.
Sorry, I missed out. I'm trying to hunt down this sale of the Wood Elf Army for £39.
Quick, buy, Luffy. You're going to get sniped. Quick.
Oh, it's free postage as well.
Yeah, he's found it. I think looking at the pictures, it's been beaten around a bit.
Oh, nothing like a bit of paint stripper on the light.
Well, it's not the
some
paint,
couches in there as well.
it's not the paint stripper, it's the bits that are actually missing off the figures.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry, where was I? Yes, it's been lovely, Neil. Thank you very much. I'm glad you and Dave enjoyed your time. Don't ever come back to my house. It cost me too much money.
So all that must be said is thank you all and all for listening. Hope you've enjoyed it. And until next time, take care. Happy gaming. We'll speak to you next week.
Yeah.
Bye.
Mordor Orcs, £26.75, 33.
The genies are the lamp, people. Run, run, run.
Thank you for listening to the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, why not share it with others by leaving us a review on iTunes? And if you have any comments or questions, you can always email the show. The address is info@meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. And you can also visit our webpage, where you'll find a complete episode archive, all the View from the Veranda podcasts, rules reviews, and our blog of hobby items and news, which is updated several times a week. This is also where you'll find the links to our presence on social media. And here you can follow us on Twitter or join our Facebook group. And finally, here you can also find details should you wish to support us by making a donation to the podcast. All this on the Meeples and Miniatures website, www.meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. The Meeples and Miniatures podcast is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 3.0 Unported license. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.